In the spring of 1261, in the crowded market streets of Qazvin, a wandering mystic named Farid of Ray approached a celebrated jurist and teacher, Jalal al-Din Harun, with a question that sounded simple, almost childish, until it detonated in the mind. Farid leaned in close, as though the air itself might overhear. "Tell me," he said softly, "what is the difference between the breath of a sleeping man and the breath of a dead man?" Harun, armored with scripture, logic, and the confidence of 1,000 debates, opened his mouth, then stopped. Because both are still, both are silent, and yet one returns. In that suspended moment, Harun felt his certainty crumble, not because he lacked information, but because the question was about the lungs. It was about the threshold, the invisible line between presence and absence, between life and imitation of life, between a soul that can awaken and a form that never will again. And this is where our descent begins, because the ancients did not treat breath as biology. They treated it as a key across the old world. Breath was never merely air moving in and out. It was the invisible currency of spirit. The Persians called it the subtle wind. The Greeks named it pneuma, the animating force that made flesh more than flesh. In India, it became prana, in China qi. Different words, same intuition, that something unseen rides on the inhale. But the most unsettling idea was this: breath is the only function that belongs to both worlds. You cannot command your heartbeat like a soldier. You cannot order your liver to cleanse your blood faster. Yet breath sits on the border, part automatic, part chosen. It is involuntary enough to sustain you in sleep, and voluntary enough to be shaped by intention. And so the mystics guarded it. In the dim schools of hidden knowledge, behind courtyards, beneath libraries, inside lodges sealed from public eyes, students learned that changing the breath changes the mind, and changing the mind changes reality, not metaphorically, practically. Because the breath does to just reflect your state, it writes it into your nervous system. Once you understand this, every inhale becomes a question. What am I feeding? And every exhale becomes a warning. What am I refusing to release? This is not relaxation. This is the first mechanism of inner rebellion. Centuries later, Carl Jung would describe the human psyche as a battlefield of opposites: reason and instinct, persona and shadow, the civilized mask and the animal beneath it. Yet Jung believed there was something deeper than conflict, a hidden organizing intelligence he called the self, the force that tries relentlessly to make us whole. Here is what most people miss. The self does not speak in sentences. It speaks in symbols, in impulses, in dreams, and sometimes in the body. Because when you are close to transformation, the body often reacts first. Your chest tightens, your throat closes, your breath becomes shallow, not as punishment, but as a signal. A truth is approaching that your current identity cannot contain. Jung studied the alchemists obsessively, not because he believed they were literally turning lead into gold, but because he saw their work as a coded map of inner metamorphosis. The furnace, the vessel, the smoke, the dissolution. These were psychic events. And breath, in that language, is the fire you carry everywhere. It can burn through old structures, or it can keep you trapped inside them. This is why initiates treated breath as sacred technology. Not a trick for comfort, but a method for stepping outside inherited programming. Breathing consciously is how you stop being an echo of the world and begin becoming a cause within it. To understand why breath was considered dangerous knowledge, we have to enter an older worldview, one that modern culture quietly replaced. Today we live inside a mechanical story. The universe is matter, humans are chemistry. Consciousness is a side effect. In that story, breath is just oxygen exchange, efficient, meaningless. But in the Hermetic imagination, the universe was not dead matter. It was mind made visible. As above, so below, as within, so without. This was not poetry. It was instruction. If your inner world is chaos, your outer life becomes disorder. If your inner world becomes aligned, reality begins to reorganize around you. And breath was treated as the steering wheel of that process. The old teachers said, the breath is the thread connecting the seen world to the unseen world, the bridge between the animal self and the awakened self, the one place where spirit and flesh negotiate every second. This is why the breath schools did not start with positive affirmations or faith or belief. They started with control of the most immediate reality, your inhalation. Because if you can govern the gate of your own body, you cannot govern your mind. And if you cannot govern your mind, then someone else will. The modern world trains you to breathe like a hunted creature, fast, shallow, always bracing. The mystics trained the opposite, slow, deliberate, sovereign. A breath that says, I am not prey. Now hear a teaching hidden inside poetry. In the opening of an old Persian masterwork, the narrator speaks as a reed flute torn from its riverbed. Since they cut me from the reeds, it cries. My voice makes every heart remember loss. The reed is hollow, emptied of pith, pierced with careful holes. Only then can breath move through it and become song. The initiates kept this image close. They said, you are the reed, separated from your origin, walking the world with a nameless ache. Your breath is the wind passing through that wound. The sorrow is not a defect. It is evidence you still remember. Jung would call this the first gate of individuation. The moment the psyche admits it is divided and can no longer pretend to be complete. The cut is necessary. The emptiness is necessary. Without hollow space, nothing higher can play through you. This is the alchemist's nigredo, the darkening of false certainty. When you breathe into the emptiness, the old identity dissolves, quietly today. Alchemy begins with prima materia, the raw substance. Here, the substance is you. The tight jaw, the guarded ribs, the breath held like a fist. The manuals called it solve et cogula, dissolve and bind again. Breath is the solvent. Inhale gathers sensation, attention, vitality. Exhale dissolves stories, defenses, the urge to control. Many never feel this rhythm because they live braced, crowded with stimulus, mistaking noise for life. So the initiate trains a different loop. He lets the outbreath run longer than instinct prefers, not for comfort, but to practice death in miniature. Each long release loosens the ego's grip and reveals a quiet witness behind it. That witness is what Jung meant by the self. Not a thought, but a center of gravity that remains when masks fall away. In the strictest lodges, this cycle became 4 stations: gathering, fullness, offering, and void. To master breath was to walk them consciously, again and again. And every cycle rewrites the mind. Script daily. The first station is the inhale. the return of scattered pieces. When you draw breath in, you are not only pulling oxygen into tissue, you are collecting attention. Every worry you left in yesterday, every argument replayed in the mind, every notification that stole a fragment of you, these are dispersed like ash. The inhale is the quiet command. Come back. Old Sufi manuals called this gathering baraka, a subtle blessing that saturates the world like perfume in the air. Whether you believe in that language or not, the effect is measurable. Slow nasal inhalation steadies the limbic system and synchronizes the brain's rhythms. Jung would say you are withdrawing projections, reclaiming what you mistakenly placed outside yourself. A medieval tale speaks of a guide bird assembling a flock to seek a hidden king. The journey begins the moment the birds stop circling in confusion and face one direction. So does yours. One inhale taken deliberately, turning chaos into a single point of aware. The second station is the pause at the top. Fullness. Suspension. The world held in stillness. Lungs expanded. Blood enriched. The body tastes completion for a brief instant. In the old schools, this was the threshold between becoming and being. A moment where nothing needs fixing, nothing needs adding, and the ego cannot bargain its way into control. Jung would call it a glimpse of the archetypal center, the calm eye inside the storm. Alchemists named it albedo, the whitening, when the vessel clears and the inner light appears. But the teachers warned, this sweetness is not a home. If you cling to it, you turn breath into possession, and possession becomes suffocation. Even spiritual peace can become a new addiction. So you learn to enjoy the pause without grabbing it. You let the mind witness fullness, then release it. This is discipline. To touch wholeness and still choose movement. It is the apex, not the destination. Proof the door exists, and training to walk away unafraid again. The third station is the exhale, offering. Now the work turns sharp. To breathe out is to surrender what you just gathered, to empty the vessel before it hardens into attachment. In many traditions, the outbreath is linked to death, not as tragedy, but as practice. The Stoics rehearsed release each day, loosening their grip on praise, status, even plans. The breath makes this rehearsal physical. In the lodges of the East, adepts took it further. With the outbreath, they pictured the false dissolving into the real, a discipline of unmaking. Jung noted that the ego's deepest fear is not pain, but disappearance. The moment it learns it is a mask. A long exhale becomes a gentle stripping away. Identities, roles, stories, the need to be certain. Here, the paradigm breaks. You stop treating yourself as a fixed object and feel what you are. A process, a current, a wave. Exhale, and the wave returns to the ocean, free, and in return anxiety loses the throne. It can arise, yet it cannot rule. The fourth station is the pause after exhale. The void. The lungs are empty. The body demands air. And yet there is a brief interval where nothing enters. This is the underworld gate. The mystics refuse to flee. It feels like falling, because the survival mind equates emptiness with danger. But in the inner sciences, emptiness is the womb. Alchemists called this pure nigredo, the blackening where form collapses and certainty dies. Jung described it as meeting the shadow without distraction, staying present while the psyche sheds its borrowed armor. If you can remain here, one heartbeat longer than comfort allows, you discover a shocking fact. The fear is louder than the reality. In that silence, the next inhale is no longer automatic. It becomes a choice, a rebirth. The old self cannot follow you into the void, but something deeper can. And each time you return, you widen the space inside you where truth can land. This is why teachers said linger in the gap, and the gap will teach you. From the heights of symbol, we descend into the laboratory of the body. The old masters were not naive. They watched how breath changes blood, pulse, and mind. Modern physiology names the same levers. Slow rhythmic breathing, especially with a longer exhale, stimulates the vagus nerve, a pathway running from brainstem to heart and gut. That signal releases acetylcholine, softening the heartbeat, widening vessels, and shifting the brain toward calm, receptive rhythms. Rapid chest breathing does the opposite. Adrenaline rises, cortisol floods, and perception narrows into threat. Here is the forbidden advantage. You can transmute these states by design. Not by wrestling thoughts, but by shaping airflow. The breath dissolves agitation and coagulates steadiness until the nervous system accepts a new default. What looks like occult power is often nervous system literacy, held with reverence instead of brute will. This is solve et cogula in flesh. Liberation practiced daily, unseen today. But breath has a shadow, and the shadow is where the real initiation begins. Watch a child breathe. The belly rises, ribs expand, shoulders float. One wave through the whole body. Then watch an adult shaped by fear, work, trauma, or constant performance. The breath shrinks upward into the chest. The diaphragm locks. The throat narrows. We do not merely feel anxious. We breathe anxiety into permanence. Wilhelm Reich called this character armor. Muscles turned into barricades. The jaw clenched to hold back anger. The chest tightened to avoid grief. The belly drawn in to hide vulnerability. Over time, the armor becomes invisible, and we forget it was ever chosen. But the body remembers. In the mystical language, this is hijab, the veil. Layers of conditioning that block direct perception. Each veil is a knot in the breath, a place life force cannot pass cleanly. When you begin breathing deeper, those knots loosen, and what you buried rises. Sadness, rage, trembling fear. This is not sickness. It is the return of stolen parts. The breath does not create chaos. It reveals it, so it can be integrated. This is why advanced breathwork was never taught casually. When the unconscious opens, it does not send polite messages. It sends storms. In modern terms, practices like holotropic-style breathing can trigger non-ordinary states where memory, emotion, and symbolic imagery surface with force. People report reliving childhood scenes, sensing primal birth fear, or encountering transpersonal visions that feel larger than personal psychology. Whether interpreted as psyche or spirit, the impact is real. The ancient lodges insisted on containment, ritual, guidance, integration. Without a vessel, revelation becomes overwhelm. Jung warned that inflation follows powerful experiences. When the ego steals the sacred and claims it as personal greatness, that danger is subtle. The seeker begins to collect altered states like trophies, building a new identity out of being awakened, which is only another mask. The correct fruit is humility. If breath opens the inner world, it should also soften the need to control it. The goal is not ecstasy. The goal is truth, lived. The breath is a scalpel. It can cut away illusion, but only if held with patience and skill. Otherwise, it wounds the very mind it tries to free. In the dim circle of a remembrance gathering, the practice becomes simple. Breath joined to a sacred phrase. Inhale. Negation, no false gods. Exhale, affirmation, only the real remains. The meaning is psychological as much as spiritual. With each inhale, you strip away what you worship unconsciously: approval, anxiety, status, control. With each exhale, you return to what cannot be taken: awareness itself. The rhythm entrains the nervous system. The repetition focuses attention until thought quiets and something deeper begins to perceive. The Sufis called it the heart, not the organ of flesh, but a center of knowing beneath intellect. Jung called this the numinous, contact with the sacred, the experience of something greater than the ego that reorganizes the soul from the inside. Yet here the greatest trap waits. The ego can use God talk as decoration. It can weaponize spirituality for superiority. The old teachers named this the commanding self, the part that demands to be special. True remembrance deflates it. Over time you notice you are not doing the breath. The breath is doing you. The practice becomes less possession, more surrender. Beyond surrender lies a strange freedom, not disappearance, but clear seeing. The false separation dissolves, and what remains is alive. Now return to the modern room. 3 a.m., chest tight, thoughts looping, the future collapsing in the mind like a dark tunnel. Ancient knowledge does not erase this. It gives you a ground to stand on. The breath is always now. You cannot inhale yesterday. You cannot exhale tomorrow. This single fact is a doorway out of the mind's prison. Existentialists spoke of angst, of being toward death, of radical freedom in a universe without guarantees. The breath does not argue with these truths. It teaches presence inside them. When you stay with the inhale, you stop fleeing. When you stay with the exhale, you stop grasping. Anxiety may remain, but it no longer owns you. So before you leave, take one conscious breath. Feel the cool entry at the nostrils, the widening ribs, the pause of fullness. Then release, slow and gentle, as though letting go of an identity. Notice the empty space after. That void is both death and womb. The secret is this: you are not breathing, you are being breathed by a vast intelligence older than your plans. Your breaths are numbered, but the mystics add a final riddle: die before you die, and you will never die. You are a reed. Will you be hollow enough for the song to pass through? And if you want something practical, something you can use today, begin with this. 3 cycles, nothing more. Inhale through the nose for 4 slow counts. Pause for 2. Exhale for 6, as if pouring hot water from a cup without spilling. Pause again for 2. That is 1 round. 3 rounds is enough to shift the inner climate. Do it before a difficult conversation. Do it before opening your phone. Do it when you notice the jaw tightening, the stomach pulling inward, the mind looking for a threat. You are not calming down. You are rewiring the spell the world cast on your nervous system. If you felt something move while listening, if a line pierced you or a silence opened, write 1 word in the comments. Breathe. I read them all. And if you want the next documentary, where we trace this same hidden science through Gnostic Christianity and the mystery of the inner Christ, subscribe now. The next door is closer than you think. Right now.